Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be able to speak to you. I saw in recent interviews you already spoke in length about reading the novel during lockdown. I was curious, what were the next steps for you? So you read it, you approached Peter Spears. How do you go about the adaptation process?
Peter Spears and I were trading novels back and forth, things we were interested in, and this one came to both of us at the same time. And we were both really excited by it. So we contacted Shannon Pufall, the novelist. This was her first novel. I think it was published in 2014. She agreed to option us the book, and we just went about really thinking about writers that we both knew. And there was someone named Bryce Cass, who is a remarkable screenwriter. He'd been produced once in the movie Lizzie, and I had developed something with him, and I knew that I had a shorthand with him, and I thought it might be a really good fit for him. He read the novel, told us exactly what he thought he would want to do with it, and it really kind of meshed with what we had hoped to do. It's a very interior novel and really beautiful, but it moves kind of backwards and forwards in time. Our job was to take that and give it a shape, beginning, middle, and end, and also give these characters voices, which is what Bryce set out to do.
Absolutely. So you were rather hands-on, deciding which story beats you really had to have in the adaptation?
Yeah, it was important to me, that we worked closely together. And Bryce and I already had a rapport from a pitch that we had worked up. I knew we could do that easily. And so when he came to me with a rough shape for it, kind of not really a 3-act shape, because it kind of, it's, what do I want to say? It's a bit like a country road, the way this moves. We really follow Muriel and we really follow Julius. So, the biggest challenge we had was for these two characters who kind of fall in love and have this big impact on each other and really inspire each other. They're apart through most of the story. So we had to find ways of making them think about each other. They kind of, we added in these, Shannon had letters, but we added in a couple more letters and phone calls. And so you really felt this yearning between the two of them and their influence on each other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm reading a novel right now, and I feel that the screenplay and your film were a bit more generous to some of the characters, I feel. For instance, Julius, he has all his teeth in the film, and he's also, I want to say, not quite as ruthless as he is in the novel in terms of the people he's stealing from. Was that also something deliberate you decided already while writing, or was it something you developed while shooting?
Julius's character really evolved, and when you get someone like Jacob in that role, I really wanted to see what he would bring to it. And he brought a real sensitivity to it. And rather than the ruthless Julius as you described him in the novel, he brought someone who was a little more soulful and a little more damaged. And so I thought that was really interesting. And he's such a thoughtful actor. It was a combination of wanting him in the final scenes to be sympathetic, which is why we didn't have him steal all of her money as he does in the novel. But also, I think, what do they say? Casting is 80% of a film and a character. So, Jacob really brought something special to it.
And speaking of casting Jacob Elordi, because his character and Muriel, they mirror each other throughout the film. And I also sense the physical likeness between him and Daisy Edgar-Jones. Was this something that you were looking for from the get-go?
No, I didn't really. I really didn't imagine that they had a similarity. There's a lot of mirroring that happens. I think their love is this kind of fascination with each other. And it's the thing that really attracted me to the book, to be honest. The idea of a platonic love that could happen between two queer people. And I thought that was really beautiful. But the characters are perfectly mismatched, because Muriel, I think, is in love with the idea of Julius's freedom and his independence and the way he lives his life. And Julius, I think, is fascinated by the idea of belonging somewhere. Even though everything he does seems to contradict it, when he's in that hotel room with Henry, he's really trying to protect this little bubble that they've created for each other.
Thank you for broaching the subject, because I've only seen something marginal similar to this love story 25 years ago. I'm not sure if you've seen the film Common Ground by Donna Deitch. It's literally the only time I've ever seen two people who are not physically attracted to each other still be attracted to each other in a different way. It's with Jason Priestley and Brittany Murphy, and he has a beautiful line. He says, "I think you like me because you're like me." And I felt that this also kind of very mirrored in On Swift Horses.
Yeah. I remember as a student having a screenwriting teacher who said, a romantic story is only good as the things that are keeping the people apart. And when I read this, I thought, wow, this is like the ultimate restraining force, because these two people are never going to be together in that way. Of course, lots of queer people married in the 1950s, for appearances, but these people were really in love with each other. I thought it was so unique, and it's the thing that made me feel compelled to tell this story. It reminded me a lot of like when I was a young adult, like in ACT UP. There were a lot of alliances between the lesbian community and the gay community, and that was interesting to me. That it kind of brought that kind of affection and alliance forward.
In a lot of your other interviews, you spoke about deliberately staying away from films or other references of the time, and you wanted to give the film a contemporary feel, and it really worked. But I'm also curious, because you've quite recently also worked in a lot of films about queer history or a queer lens on history. Is that something you deliberately seek out?
I think I'm always attracted to writers and good writing. It just kind of happened that way. I think what you're referring to, the last thing I did before this was Ron Nyswaner's Fellow Travelers. And Ron Nyswaner, who wrote Philadelphia, created that series and wrote it. And it's just such an amazing story and a part of history that I wasn't familiar with. And it felt very relevant. At that time, we were just in the middle of a Trump administration. So it was like very fresh, the idea of McCarthyism and looking at it in that way. And then the Lavender Scare. And then before that, I did this story of Halston, which is something that I've been developing for a long time, which is about this singular creator of fashion and this whole world that he created, and the way he was corrupted. So yeah, I guess it's not a intentional thing. It just seems to be like what I've been attracted to.
And I also kind of include the assassination of Gianni Versace in this. I really loved your work in this. It's one of the first times I noticed how a director makes a difference in a series that's kind of, it's headed by someone different. I'm not saying this to flatter you, but I really, one of my favorite coming out scenes I've ever seen on television is where Finn Wittrock's character basically says, "I'm like you," without saying anything. It's just literally his expression changes. And I saw similarities of this in the scene where Julius speaks to Muriel and she says, "I don't know what you're talking about." And he says, "I think you probably do." It's so beautiful, where so much is said, but not with the actual words that are being used.
Yeah.
How do you approach this with your actors? Do you go by this traditional way of, okay, this is the lines and this is what's behind the lines, or how do you tackle this?
I think with something that, like, Tom Rob Smith, who wrote Versace, is a beautiful writer, and Finn Wittrock is so accomplished as an actor. And you don't really, when everyone understands, after you've gone through the script and everyone's, seems to clearly understand what it's about, then the unspoken things really play beautifully. And the same with Daisy Edgar Jones and Jacob Elordi. That scene was a big, it's their big scene. And it had so many intricacies and so many movements within it that Bryce, the writer, had designed so perfectly. And I mean, they're just two of the smartest actors out there today. So I didn't need to explain much, but keeping everybody on the same page and everybody, with the same intention helps. And just kind of creating a place of, a calm place, like for a scene as complex as the one that Muriel and Julius have in the backyard, you really want to give them the time and the support to try things out. And, Jacob had this idea, and he said, if it's okay, I want to try getting really, really close to her, during this scene. And I thought, wow, okay, let's try it. And it's what, I'm always looking for that thing in a scene that's transcendent, the thing that puts it into, the realm of like, oh, this is something I haven't seen before. It's a love scene, but it's not a love scene. It's coming out to her and he's asking her for her help, or he's manipulating her and just to ask her for money. It walks this line, and I thought the two of them played that so beautifully.
Yeah, they really did. Speaking about these unsaid things, there's so much missing to the story, how Julius acquires the horse, but I didn't feel like it was lacking in any sense. I'm just curious, is that something you immediately eliminated as well in the writing process, or was it something that ended up on the cutting room floor?
It used to be that he was on a bus, and he was noticing while staring out the window, driving through California, farmlands, and he sees a sign for horses for sale. And then you see him get off the bus, and in the novel, he negotiates with this farmer to buy a horse. In the film, I mean, if you listen, you'll hear he says he beat somebody, and I gave him cards, and took the horse in the trailer, and so that's how he got there. But you kind of get the feeling that he's such a con man that, and he obviously made a big effort to give her a horse, which, he thought they had a ranch, but really bringing them a horse is kind of very provocative because he knows she's been playing the horses.
I noticed a bunch of stunt doubles in the credits. Was there also something eliminated from that? Because I don't really recall. I think it's a Sandra stunt double, and I'm not quite sure.
Yes, there was a scene where the horse is in the novel. You'll get to it. There's a scene where the horse they corral the horse and they trap it and they're trying to tame it. It was one of those things where it kind of took us down a road that wasn't necessarily helpful. I feel like the old adage that they say, like, the last edit of your script is in the edit room, is very true. This film, there was a lot of things that we loved about it, but some of them turned out to be more literary. And, that was a scene that forced the exposure of the relationship between Sandra and Muriel. But what we did was much simpler. We had him driving home, and he witnesses them on the porch, and he starts to understand where she's been disappearing to all the time.
Mm-hmm. I already alluded to the fact that you said you didn't want any references to other films, but obviously this whole idea of horse being a metaphor is so present. And I like that in your film it's quite understated. There's the betting on the horses, and then there's the horse at the end. And it's not a continuous through line. I'm just curious, you mentioned there weren't films you were referencing, but if perhaps subconsciously things like The Misfits played a part in your approach to the horses in the film?
I think there are things that are inherent in the novel that are very, very cinematic. It's Shannon's working in the realm of, in some of the dialogue and in the gambling world. It's the melodrama in the domestic scenes between the husband and the wife. It's the love triangle. So one of the things that I wanted to avoid was directly quoting films from the 50s or films that we'd seen before, which is so easy to do. Instead, we looked at documentary photography from the time period. And Luc Montpellier, the cinematographer, and I really went deep into the photography of Bruce Davidson, who photographed, young people in that time. Gordon Parks, the famous journalistic photographer, street photographer, and filmmaker. We looked at his photography, and Vivian Mayer, the sort of uh, posthumously discovered photographer who did a lot of street photography in the 50s. So we kind of took our cues from that. The style of it inspired me as a filmmaker, as a kid, to want to get involved with films. I think there are things that are coded. There are things that are uh, openly about queer relationships, and then I think there's a genre of things that are just like The Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant is the most, you know, queer film imaginable, but it's not really about queer relationships. I mean, there is sort of a sadomasochistic lesbian relationship in the middle of it, but something like The Boyfriend is like it's so gay.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
It's so nice talking with you, Sonia.
Yes, likewise.